The first thing I want to know from you is I'd love to get your single best tip across 5 what I think are key elements to YouTube videos that everyone sort of has to figure out. So we'll take them one at a time. So let's start with video titles. What's your single best tip for video titles?
Single best tip for video titles is be clear instead of clever.
I say that all the time. I like that.
Yeah.
Why is that?
The average American has a third grade reading level, unfortunately. So that's a big deal. The other thing is that when you try to be clever, you can miss the mark. It can be confusing and you can alienate people, disregard them, or they just disqualify themselves by saying, I guess that's not for me because it's not clear that it is for me. Or, oh, that's not what I want. It's not obvious that's what I want. So I'm going to move on to what I actually want. If you're not clear, somebody else will be, and they will be able to capture attention probably a little bit easier than you because we avoid confusion. When something is clearly for us, we're like, yes, thank you. Let's go. All right, now let me see how good it is. Let me give it a chance. Oh, you say that's for me? Let me find out if that's true. But if something's like not obvious that's for you, you avoid it. So the thing is, videos are the same. If videos are going to attract people, it needs to be obvious that it's for them. It needs to be obvious, but the value is.
And do you think that applies? Obviously, it's easy to see how that can apply to search and people that are looking for something specific. But do you think that also applies to people that are maybe subscribers of a channel, or do you think that
people should ignore the concept? People should ignore the concept of the idea that videos reach subscribers. Videos reach who they reach. The subscribers are not your audience. The subscribers, they should rebrand the subscriber button on YouTube to say supporter because it would be theoretically more accurate. Because just because you support somebody doesn't mean you show up for them all the time. It'd be nice if you did, but that's more accurate. That's more accurate. YouTube isn't putting a video in front of me just because I subscribe to somebody. YouTube will put a video in front of me based on my behavior and what YouTube believes that I'm interested in today, not what I cared about a year ago. And the thing is, you could subscribe to somebody because they were there for you at a phase in your life where you needed what they offered. And if they did their job, you may not be with them 5 years later because they've done their job.
Along those lines, do you think subscribers are overrated in terms of an episode?
I massively think they are, but I understand why they are. They're overrated after 10,000. 90% of YouTubers don't have 10,000 subscribers even. More than 90% aren't in the YouTube partner program and monetized. So subscribers are overrated after you get 10,000 of them because most people don't realize that if you got 10,000 of them, you're in the bottom of the top 10% of all content creators on the platform. It doesn't even matter what your niche is at that point either. It doesn't even matter. That's just aggregate.
But when you say the bottom, meaning once you're over 10,000,
bottom of the top,
you're already into top echelon.
You're at the bottom of that top echelon.
Gotcha.
Look, being at the bottom of Mount Olympus is still being on Mount Olympus. You're bottom of the pantheon, but you're there.
But you think until you get to 10,000, an emphasis on subscribers is actually worth it?
Only because features are gate kept, but the most of what you need, you get if you get to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time and get monetized on YouTube, you would get access to almost all the features. The only features or things that you'd get disqualified from, there's a few of them, but then once you have 10,000 subscribers, there's no gatekeeping on features. So because features are gate kept, I allow some emphasis on 1,000 to 10,000, but beyond that, now we're getting into status, vanity, and things. From a technical standpoint, you're not advantaged. It's psychology after that. Obviously, there's some psychology to a subsection of viewers of how important you are based on your subscriber count. However, what trumps that? If you're a millionaire, but you have 20,000 subscribers, is someone more valid than you if they have 1 million subscribers, but they're broke? Is somebody who has 30,000 subscribers, but has expertise because they're a PhD in a field where a PhD would matter, not just in general, but in one that would matter, versus somebody who's their junior, but is more popular, more charismatic, or more attractive? They're not necessarily a better person to watch, but they are better at getting people to watch.
You explain when you referenced features, what you mean by features.
Primary example would be that if you have 1,000 subscribers and are monetized, you obviously unlock monetization features in YouTube, but that includes access to things like the merch shelf, for example, shopping, the ability to sell physical and digital products, items, and merchandise in YouTube, that's unlocked by subscribers, but also by monetization with watch time.
So you don't mean being editorially featured. You mean features like tools like
utility.
monetization and that kind of stuff.
Yes, utility.
Gotcha.
The utilities. So you have to
Cool.
qualify through what you could argue is a vetting process done by, you could argue that crowdsourced vetting, if you will, to say that, okay, this person has genuine support. They can be trusted with the access to these utilities and tools, and they are going to be someone who are not necessarily going to damage our reputation with advertisers as a company.
Right.
So it's a way of, the community itself is a way of vetting someone. So
Right,
it's
and getting a
crowdsourced.
certain level of credibility,
Correct.
to get to that point.
To give you
Cool.
those utilities. Exactly.
The next element I want to talk about that I know everyone has to figure out and tries to think about is thumbnails. What would you say? And again, I know that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, but if you had to give one sort of single best tip about thumbnails, what would it be?
Don't make them an afterthought. No more lazy thumbnails. Thumbnails are dressing for the job you want. If you want to be someone's favorite YouTuber, if you want to be somebody with 100,000 subscribers one day, dress your thumbnails up as if you want that job then. Don't come as you are. If you're going to do thumbnails, don't come as you are. Dress for the job you want. If you want a silver play button, you want a YouTube trophy, you want a silver play button, like the one that I've got back there somewhere, the answer to that is you dress for the job you want, and that dress is your thumbnails. So if your thumbnails are not coming correct and they're not to the caliber of a person in your niche with 100,000 or a million subscribers, it's okay if that's not where you are today, but every single day, you should be working toward being able to compete at that level, because then don't complain about where you are otherwise.
And let me ask you, you see a lot of thumbnails that look the same, right? That look roughly the same, right? It's a couple of big words of text. It's the person's face. It's whatever.
Is anybody innovating movie posts? Is anyone innovating movie posts?
Right. But that's what I mean. I guess that's where I'm going. And this might be a false assumption I'm making, but there's a reason everyone's doing that way and that's what works and you should do it that way? Or are there other ways that can be just as successful?
To the extent that me and my contemporaries don't always make our thumbnails the same. I'll give you a prime example. You've seen my thumbnails lately, and maybe in edits, you can actually pop some on the screen that demonstrate what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Out of all the YouTube educators, do you see the rest of them like posing with physical props in the sense of, has anyone other than me turned the YouTube play button into a physical prop that they're like holding? Whether it's my silver subscriber play button trophy, some people are doing that. But I've taken the actual YouTube logo and turned it into, in my thumbnail, something that I'm holding in my hand, or I'm taking my analytics and I'm holding a graph or a data chart in my hand. Almost none of my contemporaries, my friends, my peers are doing that. Making my thumbnails unique by using my skills in graphic design, digital art, photo manipulation. I bring a lot of that to the table. Some of them have started stepping up their thumbnails a while back, because before that, I was the main one using lighting effects in my thumbnails per se and stuff like that. And I was doing customized photo shoots. Before we all used to just, all right, throw up ourselves with a face and text and call it a day. But like I go out of my way to do custom photo shoots. Custom photo shoots can make your thing unique in that sense, and you can find weird things to do like I do with Photoshop. However, there are things that make sense to do. For one thing, figuring out color combinations. My cheat code is, all right, pick a sports team. They've already done all the market research on color combination. Pick a sports team. So that's one thing. Also, depth of field. You may have noticed that, okay, we cut ourselves out of the backgrounds. We use drop shadows. That's depth of field that we're creating. Foreground, background, middle ground. We're using that. Those are just standard design techniques. So when you see all these things in YouTube and say, oh, I guess it's working. It's working YouTube because it's worked in billboards. It's worked in flyers. It's worked in signage. It's worked in mailers. It's worked in advertising for 150 years to do some of these things, because human behavior hasn't changed so much. As the main thing that's changed human behavior is the smartphone. But outside of anything applicable to the smartphone, or that we have screens now, which is why we all wear glasses, because we all burned our eyes out. We're not blinking anymore. Aside from some of these fundamental societal paradigm shifts in human behavior, human beings haven't evolved conceptually in a meaningful way for hundreds of years to where our psychology is any different than it is. Which means that we will always gravitate toward things like color tonality and color contrast, sharp images, eyes, human faces, emotions, mirroring what our intent and our feelings are, and so forth. So again, all the human psychology element is what's undervalued in YouTube and the execution of thumbnails. And what happens in where people do something poor and they're like, why isn't this working, is they're inserting their own preferences and taste into something instead of prioritizing putting the audience first. and more importantly, putting the audience avatar and psychology first of saying, why would this work for my audience avatar? And what about my audience avatar makes me think this is a good idea? People will not challenge themselves on that. They'll do something and say, I like it, and then wonder why. Ask someone,
Right.
why is your thumbnail, why is your color for your brand that? They're like, oh, it's my favorite color. I'm like, okay, so it has nothing to do with anything about the psychology of your audience. It's just because it's your favorite color.
Right. Or they
I'm like,
just go,
"Yup."
oh, it looks cool.
Or it's, oh, it looks cool. I wanted to do
Yeah.
that. It's okay. I'm like, if you ask me why I do something, I'll be able to tell you what aspect of psychology that I'm hoping to leverage by doing it.
How much, two quick follow-ups on thumbnails. One, I'm curious, and all of that was really interesting and great to know. How much time do you spend creating a thumbnail for a video?
I have spent thousands upon thousands of hours in my lifetime in Photoshop. So the thing is, I'm not a good gauge of how long someone
Because
can
you're
spend.
quick.
Because I'm quick, I
Right.
have tools they don't have. I have hardware and software that makes things faster. I have a drawing tablet that makes some things more precise than it would be on their side. I have the resources to have someone help me go down to my studio basement, help me, or I have my remote triggers and I can use the best cameras in the world to make
Right.
custom photo shoots for myself, and do 100 photos in the course of a 45-minute photo shoot that I can use and then take that. So it's an unfair, I have a
Right. But
multitude
the
of
time
unfair.
aside, and clearly, even just based on your description and answer of that, you take them very seriously and put a significant amount of effort into them. And then my other question is, do you find yourself, once you put up a video with the thumbnail, do you find yourself switching thumbnails at any point, or whatever it goes up at, you stick with that?
It depends. Generally speaking, I always assume my new A/B testing strategy is a concept with text, a concept without text. And sometimes, depending on the topic, one will work better than the other. If people are going to A/B test, I would suggest that they consider A/B testing with text, without text, with their face, without their face, unless they're building a personal brand, in which case it's almost always use your face. So I would say with or without text. And then I would also consider maybe an A/B testing strategy around a certain facial expression versus a different facial expression.
And I
So
don't even know, does YouTube allow you to A/B test on the fly, or do you have to run it for a few days and then run the other one?
you have, you would use a third party tool. The best one that I use is TubeBuddy. So I would A/B test with TubeBuddy. I've been able to see results and then say, oh, there's a 14% better response on that. Yep, that's the thumbnail. Then 14% better, 14% better. So in perpetuity. So I'll do that. So TubeBuddy is what I recommend. And obviously they do sponsor a lot of my content. I'm also an affiliate with them. But from a utility standpoint, I don't necessarily know that there's a better tool. If you wanted to A/B test before choosing a thumbnail, you could use Thumblytics. Thumblytics is something you could use. I don't have an affiliate link for them or anything, but I've used them in the past. And the thing I like about them is you can get human feedback and people kind of rate the thumbnails and rank them for you. You could submit 2 thumbnails, 3 thumbnails, whatever. You pay for it. And you can do that before choosing and saying, okay, I'm going to put my best foot forward instead of waiting till after the fact. You just have to keep in mind, though, that the people rating your thumbnails may not be the same psychology as your audience. They're a general user.
Right.
So if the thing is, if you're in a niche that matters, if you're a business person, you might be in a niche that matters. And so the other thing is, like, niche creators will judge all YouTube advice, all YouTube help videos, and even their own content versus entertainers like, oh, what's Mr. Beast doing? Or, oh, here's this famous YouTuber. It's like, they're a famous entertainer. You might as well be comparing a pro athlete to a college professor and judging them against each other's.
It's a completely different
It's,
game.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And the only thing they have in common is the same platform. That's the only thing they have in common. It doesn't matter. So like people need to stop doing that. But they do it because I'm like, here are the people who are the best. It's, oh, you mean that on a platform that's designed to monopolize people's time, you mean that people making silly or goofy or funny or entertaining videos or conspiracy theories are getting more attention than the utility of any small business owner, any college professor, any trainer, any software suite expert, any productivity. Oh, say it ain't so. That people would rather watch. Say it ain't, especially with the majority of the base being under 25 years old.
Yeah.
There's a difference. So I just tell people with a grain of salt of this person isn't doing that. Well, that person is. I'm like, okay, step back, look at your specific niche, your specific age demographic, especially if it's people over 30, and realize that what's popular on YouTube is not what's going to be popular with people in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah. The next element I wanted to ask you about, and we talked about subscribers a little bit before, but what would be your single best tip for calls to action, either calls to action for people to subscribe to their channel, or maybe it's a call to action to get them to join an email list or whatever it is, but call to action in general, what's your best tip for doing those?
Communicate and demonstrate tremendous value. Demonstrations of value and communicating that value accurately and articulately is extremely important, because you're asking them to do something that largely you and they both know that you're asking for it because it is going to benefit you, and they get that. So how does it benefit me proportionately? Equivalent exchange here. And the thing is, when you fail to communicate or articulate that very well and make it abundantly clear because you're trying to be clever, it doesn't help and it doesn't work. So if you're going to ask someone to buy your book, you need to be able to tell them what they get out of buying the book, because you get to be a bestseller. You get to make money. You get to have another book sale. You get the positive reviews in Amazon. What do they get by investing not only in buying your book, but spending the time to actually read it? What do they get? If they subscribe to your YouTube channel, what videos are they going to be getting? And what do those videos do? And what transformation in their life does that provide? And that's a reason to subscribe. It's not about, subscribe and help me reach my goal of reaching 100,000 subscribers. That's not reason. That's not reason, Jack. That's not reason. That's not reason,
what's
Barbara.
in it for them?
That's not what's in it for me, Barbara.
Yeah. And it's so funny. It's the same thing I say with newsletters all the time, where people are like, join my mailing list. Why? So it's, again, very similar.
No, what you would say is, you would say, if you want insights into the creator economy and you want to peek behind the curtain of what it means to be a full-time content creator in this industry, then you'll definitely want to subscribe to my newsletter. I send it out every week. I don't give you any spam. And I will also have a roundup of all the important news and stories that you want to know as a creator economy insider. Boom. That's
what I think the thing about the way you just did that I like is, I think a lot of people go, subscribe to my newsletter, subscribe to my channel to get this, which is doing the same thing. But I like that you flipped it and said, if you want this, then subscribe and do this, right? That you put the value first as opposed to the action you wanted them to take first, which is a really minor thing, but I think it's a smart way to present it.
Psychology is about I put the thing that they care about first because I'm putting them first. That shows that you're empathizing with their situation. Even the way I communicate, I empathize with the situation of I'm qualifying you and saying, if you want this, is empathy. So I'm also demonstrating my capacity to anticipate what you might want. So then that's also very appealing. Okay. I'm validating what you want and I'm letting you make a choice, and I'm only presenting the offer. It's up to you. So that's a really good way of doing that. You demonstrate that you understand by empathizing. Okay, I understand you. I'm now communicating in a way that's validating. Okay, fine. And now I'm making an offer, take it or leave it.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love that. So the next element, let's talk about your single best tip for video descriptions, which I see advice that seems all over the place, from like, description doesn't really matter that much to it should be super long to it should be, what's your best tip for what people should do with their video descriptions?
For your audience, monetize the hell out of it.
Meaning?
Monetize your description. So here's the thing. Far minority of people are going to read your description. That's fine. First of all, yes, the first couple of lines of the description should help someone understand what the video is. Fine and dandy. Beyond that, here's your a chance to put in things that are genuinely useful and helpful that allow you to monetize the minority of that audience that's being thoughtful enough to even look at that description in the first place. Also, if you had verbal calls to action in the video, every verbal call to action you made in that video should be fulfilled in that description, so that there is a means to take action and to do that thing. So whatever you said or promised in the video, put it in the description, make it clear, make it easy to click, make it obvious, and allow them to get the thing that you referenced in the video. So whatever you referenced, whatever books you reviewed, whatever tools you talked about, whatever other videos you recommended, put them in the description. This is your opportunity to monetize.
How important is description to search these days?
So the problem with that question is this. It's more and less than everyone assumes, because I will tell you this. Everyone looks at YouTube and then ignores how Google utilizes YouTube. And even other YouTube educators or so-called gurus or whatever, they tell the audience what they want to hear a lot of times, and that's fine. There are things YouTube tells creators that creators want to hear and say, oh, we don't emphasize. When engineers and programmers say, oh, we don't care about this, or it doesn't matter that much, whatever, they're not giving you a complete and clear answer. And sometimes, even if they are, or they put it in a help document, it's not the full contextualization of that story, because then there are things you can observe and verify that would contradict what you're being told. And one of the first things people should look at when they want to say that SEO is dead, when they're communicating this stuff to YouTubers, all right, on a 100% scale, what percentage of YouTubers or aspiring YouTubers do you think are entertainment-based channels versus education-based channels?
It's a good question. It's funny. This is going to be a weird answer. I would guess the majority of channels are entertainment, but I would guess the majority of views go to education.
No, the majority.
Wrong on both counts?
Not entirely. The majority of channels are entertainment. If you want to be generous, you could say it's 80-20 just for the sake of argument. 80% entertainment, 20% education for the sake of argument. Now, the skew of that, if you go to English speaking channels, probably closer to 90-10.
Gotcha.
Because cultures outside the US would also prioritize education, utility, and things a lot more than we would. So you can see how that would happen, especially only in their language, so on and so forth, right? So you can see how that would happen. The other part of that is in terms of where the majority of views go. 90% of all views on YouTube funnel up to the top 3% of channels.
Yeah.
I think
that's
that was
like a basic, I forget, there's some like law of whatever, I forget what it is, but that's almost everywhere.
But that's the case study that I think I want to say that came from either Harvard Business Review or Oxford Economics. I don't remember which case study it is that they did on that, but people I've talked to at YouTube have said, yeah, that's pretty accurate. So the distribution of views, but that's globally in aggregate, by the way. And so just remember also there's a disparity there in terms of English versus non-English and so on and so forth when we talk about that. And we're also talking about 100 million channels globally. So when we say top 3%, we mean top 3 million channels globally. And you have to account to some extent for variations in language. You have to remember that the largest traffic on YouTube, more than 55% of it exists outside of America. So again, people are, and not just America, by the way. Oh, I forgot, non-English, it's 55%, 55 to 60% of all YouTube traffic is non-English speaking countries. So again, our audience being primarily English speaking Westerners and everything like that, it's going to be hard for them to contextualize some of this. So just keep that in mind. I say all of that to say that when you start to think about it and you start to realize this, and we talk about search is an intentional viewer, which means that it's usually an older viewer because the majority of how younger people will spend time on the internet will be in escapism. Older people have limited time, but also have usually more income and are more thoughtful about how they spend their time and their money compared to younger people. Our audience would be a primary example of that. They're thoughtful and intentional about where they put their time and what they want to get out of it. They will use YouTube much more for search than click on random incidental videos that happen to appear on the YouTube homepage. More than 80% of YouTube views are driven algorithmically, non-search algorithmic views. And then people go, okay, that's what I want to chase. But I'm like, but can you compete for that attention? And do you even want to compete with that attention? Because if your primary market is not under 25, how useful is that to you? So they ignore search. The other thing they ignore is Google. I don't know if you've noticed this, but have you noticed that Google has been prioritizing video results in all their searches, Nor?
Yeah.
So when people say SEO is dead, what are they talking about? Because the last time I checked, Google search traffic hasn't declined in mass numbers, and Google is indexing YouTube content more. And then in terms of YouTube content, you may have noticed this other thing. Google is now finding answers to questions in snippets and segments of YouTube videos. Right. And the snippets and segments are part of chapters that you create in YouTube. And video chapters in YouTube are predicated on the description is how you make those chapters. It's the description. The other thing that's contextualized is when you do a search result in Google and it pulls up a YouTube video, it boldens things in the description of the video. And the thing is, when you search for those things in Google, you can look at the keywords and tags and you can see a correlation between the results and the keywords and tags there too. So the thing that even YouTube says doesn't matter, but oh, wait, it's mattering in a Google search result when when Google YouTube indexes YouTube. Wait a minute, what's happening here? And even playlist in YouTube show up in Google search result. What are we talking about when we say SEO is dead or SEO doesn't matter, or that titles, descriptions, tags, oh, don't worry about YouTube search?
It all matters and it all depends what you're actually doing.
If you're an entertainment channel, the reason it doesn't matter is because your audience isn't searching for things to watch to be entertained, except for drama and news stories and stuff like that. and controversial figures and conspiracy and blah, blah, blah. They're searching for that. They're searching for headlines. And yeah, anyone can take advantage of that. Sure, that's when search matters for entertainers. It matters when there's a headline or a conspiracy or a scandal, because that's
Yeah.
what gets searched by people trying to waste time. People who want to waste time, they'll search for scandals. They'll search for headlines. They'll search for celebrities and public figures and product releases and so on and so forth. So again, we're talking about people who value their time in a utility sense versus
Mhm.
people who are looking time specifically to waste as frivolously as possible. So the
That makes sense.
intentionality, so the intentionality of, 80% of these views are algorithmically driven. Yes. And who are they targeting? You have to be thoughtful about these things when you're conceptualizing them.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. The last of these 5 elements that I wanted to ask you about was channel header images. What's your single best tip for channel header image? And I guess part of that is, are they even that important?
Don't overthink them,
Hmm.
but done wrong, they do undermine you. And by that, I mean, it's just like your dress and appearance. You could just keep it simple and be minimalistic as possible. It's almost impossible to go wrong as a guy with a clean ironed shirt that fits your body appropriately, a pair of clean ironed and washed jeans, and a pair of boots. It is almost impossible. Then just put on a jacket. It's almost impossible to go wrong as a man from a fashion standpoint and look like an adult if you keep it as simple as possible. And then if you try to overdo it and you try to be fancy, that's how you're going to mess up. And the thing is, but if you also do nothing and you're lazy and don't even do the bare minimum, your shirt isn't ironed. Oh, come on, man, put in effort. So
Yeah, it may not make all the difference in the world, but it's still a reflection of your brand. So
exactly. Everything matters.
it's going to
Again,
say something about, it's sending a message, whether you mean to or not.
how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
So that's where topic, title, thumbnail, description, pacing, captions, no captions, header, all of it matters in the sense that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So
And
I
they're
would
also
say
all
it
choices,
matters.
right? It's not as simple as a binary sort of right or wrong, because there's a million variables of what your goals are and what your audience is and what your whatever is, but it's being conscious about and making those choices as opposed to just doing whatever, and being strategic about it as opposed to not being strategic about it.
Exactly. And that's why, by the way, and it's no offense to anybody, but I keep bringing up the dynamic of over 25 versus under, over
Yeah.
30 versus under, because the thing is, it starkly contrasts people's intentions, expectation, and what their value system is, also what their aesthetic consideration is, what their cultural values are. Disposable income generally can be determined by a lot of these things. And that is all reflected in choices they make about content, brands, and associations. So if you're not taking that into consideration, you're in that category of, if you try to please everybody, you please nobody.
Yeah.
And you have to be very thoughtful. So for me, I know that from my data, my audience is primarily people over 25 disproportionately, and that it skews mostly upward. The
Yeah.
smallest amount of my audience is younger than that. The smallest amount of my audience is under 18. So I don't really think about it too much. It's not that they couldn't get value from my content, but the people who will in that demographic are the exception and not the rule. So I make decisions around the rule rather than the exception. It's not that I never consider the exception. I don't prioritize the exceptions.
Yeah, totally makes sense.